The camera pans across twisted metal and shattered glass where a pristine clubhouse once stood. Rain pounds the debris as a woman in a red jacket clutches legal documents, her face pale with terror. In 10 seconds, you'll discover how one woman's arrogance destroyed an entire community and landed her in federal court. The Meadowbrook Estates Homeowners Association had always been Barbara Chen's kingdom for 8 years. She ruled the manicured lawns and pristine sidewalks with an iron fist, earning the neighborhood nickname HOA Karen. But on the morning of March 15, 2023, her empire would begin to crumble faster than the clubhouse roof under Hurricane Delilah's fury. Barbara stood in her immaculate kitchen, sipping coffee from her world's best HOA President mug, completely unaware that her reign of terror was about to become a legal nightmare. The 52-year-old former insurance adjuster had built her reputation on nitpicking violations and issuing fines for everything from unapproved mailbox colors to grass that exceeded the 2-inch height limit. Another violation notice for the Johnsons, she muttered to her husband, Frank, while printing out yet another citation. Their garden gnome is clearly 3 inches taller than the approved maximum. Frank barely looked up from his newspaper. After 2 decades of marriage, he'd learned to tune out Barbara's HOA obsessions. What he didn't know was that his wife had been playing a far more dangerous game than anyone realized. 3 months earlier, during the annual HOA budget meeting, Barbara had made a decision that would haunt her forever. The community's insurance premiums had skyrocketed by 40%, eating into the reserves she'd been secretly siphoning for her own renovations. Standing before the packed community center, she delivered what she believed was a masterstroke of financial management. The insurance company is nothing but fear-mongering vultures, Barbara declared to the assembled homeowners. We've never had a major claim in 15 years. I motioned to cancel our comprehensive coverage and pocket the savings. Retired meteorologist Dr. James Martinez had raised his hand from the back row. Barbara, we're in a high-risk hurricane zone. The National Weather Service is predicting an unusually active season. Dr. Martinez. Barbara interrupted with her signature condescending smile. I spent 12 years as an insurance adjuster. I know risk assessment better than some weather man with his computer models. Motion carries. The vote was close 47-42, but Barbara's silver tongue had swayed enough homeowners with promises of reduced fees and improved amenities. Dr. Martinez stormed out, shaking his head. You'll regret this, Barbara. Mother Nature doesn't care about your budget projections. For months, Barbara basked in her victory. The saved insurance money funded her secret pet projects, a new pool deck, upgraded clubhouse furniture, and most importantly, a substantial management fee increase for herself. She'd been skimming money for years, but canceling the insurance gave her the perfect cover story for the improved finances. Everything changed on March 14th when Hurricane Delilah, a Category 4 monster, made an unexpected turn toward the coast. Barbara watched the weather reports with growing dread, but publicly maintained her confidence. It's just media hysteria, she told concerned residents. We'll be fine. But as the winds began to howl at 3 a.m. on March 15th, Barbara lay awake in her reinforced master bedroom, listening to the sounds of her kingdom being torn apart. Tree branches scratched against her windows like skeletal fingers, and somewhere in the distance, she heard the unmistakable sound of metal being twisted and concrete cracking. By dawn, Hurricane Delilah had moved on, leaving behind a scene of utter devastation. Barbara stepped outside to find half the neighborhood's trees down, roofs peeled back like sardine cans, and worst of all, the pride of Meadowbrook Estates, their $800,000 clubhouse, was completely destroyed. The building that had hosted countless community events, housed the fitness center, and served as the HOA's headquarters was now nothing but a pile of debris. The storm had ripped off the roof, collapsed two walls, and sent the expensive furniture Barbara had purchased floating into the retention pond. But the real disaster was just beginning. As homeowners emerged from their houses, surveying the damage to their own properties, the reality of Barbara's decision began to sink in. Dr. Martinez was the first to confront her as she stood amid the clubhouse ruins, frantically taking photos with her phone. "Well, Barbara," he said, his voice eerily calm, "how's the risk assessment looking now?" Before Barbara could respond, homeowner Sarah Kim approached with a thick folder in her hands. As the neighborhood's only attorney, Sarah had been quietly investigating Barbara's financial management for months, suspicious of the HOA's suddenly improved cash flow despite rising costs everywhere else. "Barbara," Sarah said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd spent 20 years in courtrooms, "we need to talk. There are some serious discrepancies in the HOA books. And now, with this disaster, well, let's just say you might want to call your own lawyer." Barbara's face went white as she realized the magnitude of her situation. Without insurance, the HOA and by extension, every homeowner was personally liable for nearly $1 million in damage. But that wasn't the worst part. If Sarah had discovered her embezzlement scheme, Barbara was looking at both civil and criminal liability. I can explain everything," Barbara stammered. But Sarah was already walking away, phone pressed to her ear. Double quotes, "Hello, District Attorney's Office. This is Sarah Kim. I need to report suspected embezzlement and fraud involving our homeowners association." As Sarah's words drifted across the debris-strewn landscape, Barbara Chen realized her 8-year reign as HOA president was about to end in handcuffs. The hurricane had destroyed more than just buildings. It had exposed a web of lies and theft that would soon make national headlines. 2 hours later, as Barbara sat in her damaged kitchen trying to figure out how to explain the missing money, she heard the sound that would haunt her dreams. Police sirens growing closer, their wailing mixing with the sound of chainsaws clearing fallen trees, and the angry voices of her neighbors demanding answers. The woman who had once fined residents for stepping on the grass was about to learn that some violations carry far more serious consequences than a warning notice taped to your front door. 3 days after Hurricane Delilah's destruction, Barbara Chen sat across from criminal defense attorney Marcus Rodriguez in his downtown office, her hands trembling as she signed a retainer agreement she couldn't afford. The $50,000 legal fee would drain her savings, but facing federal embezzlement charges without representation wasn't an option. "Mrs. Chen," Rodriguez said, reviewing the evidence folder that had grown thick with bank statements and HOA records, I'm going to be completely honest with you. The prosecution has building a strong case. Sarah Kim's forensic accounting has uncovered systematic theft dating back 3 years. Barbara's voice cracked as she tried to maintain her composure. It wasn't theft, Marcus. I was managing the community's resources more efficiently. The insurance cancellation was a legitimate business decision that unfortunately coincided with an unprecedented weather event. Rodriguez had been practicing criminal law for 15 years, and he'd heard every justification imaginable. But Barbara's case presented unique challenges. The embezzlement charges were straightforward. She diverted approximately $127,000 in HOA funds for personal use. However, the insurance cancellation, while catastrophically poor judgment, wasn't necessarily criminal. The problem, Rodriguez explained, is that the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit is treating this as a RICO case. They're arguing that you engaged in a pattern of racketeering by systematically defrauding the homeowners. If they can prove you canceled the insurance specifically to cover up your embezzlement, you're looking at 20 years in federal prison. The RICO angle had come from Special Agent Lisa Park, a tenacious investigator who specialized in white-collar crime. Agent Park had been called in when the insurance fraud reached federal thresholds, and her preliminary investigation had uncovered something that made Barbara's blood run cold. She wasn't the only HOA president in the region facing similar charges. Agent Park had discovered a pattern of corruption across 3 different homeowners associations, all involving insurance cancellations and missing funds. The federal task force believed they were dealing with organized fraud, possibly coordinated by someone with insider knowledge of the insurance industry. Mrs. Chen, Agent Park had said during Barbara's initial FBI interview, "We know you didn't act alone. Your background as an insurance adjuster, the specific timing of these cancellations, the sophisticated accounting methods used to hide the theft. Someone taught you these techniques." Barbara had maintained her innocence, but Agent Park's questions had struck uncomfortably close to the truth. There was someone else involved. Someone Barbara couldn't afford to expose without destroying what remained of her life. The real mastermind behind the scheme was Victor Mallory, Barbara's former supervisor from her insurance adjuster days. Victor had approached Barbara 18 months earlier with what he called a financial optimization strategy for HOA letters. His plan was elegantly simple: identify associations with poor oversight, encourage insurance cancellations during low-risk periods, and skim the savings before the inevitable claims occurred. It's not if disaster strikes, Victor had explained during their secret meeting at a coffee shop 50 miles from Meadowbrook Estates. It's when, but if you time it right, you can extract significant funds and blame the losses on unprecedented circumstances. Natural disasters are perfect cover stories. Victor had provided Barbara with detailed accounting software that could hide transfers, suggested specific language for insurance cancellation proposals, and even helped her identify which board members would be most susceptible to cost-cutting arguments. In exchange, Barbara sent Victor 30% of everything she embezzled. But now, facing federal charges, Barbara was torn between protecting Victor and saving herself. Rodriguez had made it clear that cooperation with federal investigators could significantly reduce her sentence, but testifying against Victor would require admitting to a level of premeditation that could destroy any chance of portraying her actions as misguided rather than malicious. The pressure intensified when Agent Park returned. With a search warrant for Barbara's home, the FBI team spent 6 hours methodically documenting evidence. But their real breakthrough came from an unexpected source: Frank, Barbara's husband. Frank had discovered Victor's business card hidden in Barbara's jewelry box while helping the FBI search. When confronted, he revealed that he'd grown suspicious of his wife's sudden interest in consulting work and had secretly installed security cameras in their home office. "I thought she might be having an affair," Frank admitted to Agent Park. "I never imagined she was stealing from our neighbors." The security footage was devastating. It showed Barbara counting cash payments, photographing confidential HOA documents, and most damaging of all, practicing her insurance cancellation presentation while reading from notes that were clearly not her own. In one particularly incriminating recording, Barbara could be heard on the phone saying, "Victor, the board bought your argument completely. They think they're saving money while I'm setting up the perfect extraction timeline." When Rodriguez reviewed the footage, he knew Barbara's defense strategy had to change completely. "Mrs. Chen, this changes everything. The prosecution now has evidence of conspiracy and premeditation. Your only option is full cooperation with the federal investigation." But Barbara's nightmare was just beginning. That evening, as she sat in her damaged kitchen trying to process the day's developments, she received a call that made her realize the true scope of her predicament. "Barbara." Victor's voice was ice cold through the phone. "I heard the FBI paid you a visit. I hope you remember our agreement about confidentiality." "Victor, they have everything. The recordings, the bank transfers, they have nothing that connects to me unless you give it to them," Victor interrupted. "And if you do, I'll make sure everyone knows that this entire scheme was your idea from the beginning. I have documentation that will make you look like the architect of a multi-million-dollar fraud operation." Barbara's hands shook as she realized Victor had been setting her up from the start. Every meeting, every phone call, every piece of advice had been carefully crafted to make her appear to be the mastermind while keeping Victor in the shadows. The next morning brought more devastating news. Sarah Kim had filed a massive civil lawsuit on behalf of all 127 homeowners in Meadowbrook Estates, seeking $3.2 million in damages. The lawsuit alleged that Barbara's actions had cost each homeowner an average of $25.00 in uninsured losses, destroyed property values, and created ongoing financial liability. "Mrs. Chen," Rodriguez explained, "even if we beat the criminal charges, the civil case could bankrupt you completely. Sarah Kim is one of the best attorneys in the state, and she's turned this into a personal crusade." Barbara stared out her office window at the still debris-filled streets of her former kingdom. Construction crews worked to clear fallen trees while neighbors she'd once ruled with citations and fines now looked at her with expressions of pure hatred. The woman who had prided herself on maintaining order and property values had become the neighborhood pariah, responsible for the biggest disaster in Meadowbrook Estates history. As Rodriguez prepared for the next phase of their defense, he couldn't shake the feeling that Barbara was still hiding something crucial. Her story about Victor Mallory was compelling, but there were gaps in her timeline that suggested an even deeper conspiracy. What Rodriguez didn't know was that Barbara had one final secret, one that could either save her or destroy everyone involved. Hidden in her safe deposit box was a recording device Victor had given her, supposedly for quality assurance during their phone calls. What Victor didn't know was that the device had been recording every conversation, including several where he explicitly outlined his role as the operations mastermind and detailed his plans to frame Barbara if anything went wrong. Barbara clutched the safe deposit box key in her pocket, knowing that her next decision would determine whether she spent the next 2 decades in federal prison or watching Victor Mallory take her place in the defendant's chair. The fight for her freedom was just beginning, and Barbara Chen was about to learn that sometimes the only way to survive a conspiracy is to expose the conspirator. The federal courthouse in downtown Tampa buzzed with anticipation on the morning of October 12, 2023. Media trucks lined the street as reporters prepared to cover what had become known as the Hurricane HOA scandal. Barbara Chen, wearing a conservative navy suit that couldn't hide her hollow cheeks and stress-induced weight loss, walked through the gauntlet of cameras with Marcus Rodriguez by her side. Inside courtroom fray, Judge Patricia Williams called the case of United States v. Barbara Chen to order. The prosecution, led by Assistant U.S. Attorney Michael Davidson, had spent months building what they believed was an airtight case of embezzlement, fraud, and racketeering. But Davidson had no idea that Barbara's defense team was about to detonate a legal bomb that would turn the entire case upside down. Your Honor, Davidson began his opening statement. The defendant Barbara Chen betrayed the trust of 127 families. She systematically stole $127,000 from her neighbors, while deliberately exposing them to catastrophic financial risk by canceling their insurance coverage when Hurricane Delilah struck. Her greed and recklessness cost innocent families their life savings. Davidson methodically presented the government's evidence, bank records showing unauthorized transfers, security footage of Barbara counting cash, and recorded phone calls discussing the extraction timeline. The case seemed overwhelming until Rodriguez stood for Barbara's defense. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Rodriguez began, Barbara Chen is not the mastermind the government wants you to believe she is. She's a victim or pawn in a sophisticated conspiracy orchestrated by someone with the knowledge, connections, and ruthlessness to exploit vulnerable communities across 3 states. Rodriguez's opening statement hinted at the bombshell evidence they'd been preparing, but the real drama began when the prosecution called their star witness, Dr. James Martinez, the meteorologist who had warned against canceling the insurance. Dr. Martinez, Davidson asked, in your professional opinion, was Mrs. Chen's decision to cancel the insurance reckless? Absolutely, Martinez replied. I specifically warned her that we were entering an unusually active hurricane season. Her dismissal of scientific data was not just irresponsible, it was willfully ignorant. But during cross-examination, Rodriguez revealed a detail that stunned the courtroom. Dr. Martinez, you mentioned that Mrs. Chen seemed unusually confident in her position. Did she ever indicate she had received professional advice about insurance risk assessment? Martinez paused, considering the question. Actually, yes. She mentioned consulting with an industry expert who had extensive experience with insurance claims. The revelation sent whispers through the gallery. But the real shock came when Rodriguez called his first witness, Victor Mallory. Victor entered the courtroom with the confidence of a man who believed he was untouchable. As Barbara's alleged co-conspirator, he should have invoked his Fifth Amendment rights. Instead, he took the stand, apparently prepared to testify against Barbara. Mr. Mallory, Rodriguez began. What is your relationship with my client? I worked with Barbara Chen when she was an insurance adjuster. Victor replied smoothly. She contacted me last year seeking advice about her HOA's insurance costs. And what advice did you give her? Victor's testimony was carefully crafted to portray himself as an innocent consultant who had simply provided general guidance about insurance markets. He claimed that any specific advice about canceling coverage had been Barbara's interpretation of their conversations. But Rodriguez was ready. Mr. Mallory, are you familiar with this device? Rodriguez held up a small digital recorder. Victor's confident expression faltered slightly. It appears to be a recording device. This recording device was provided to my client by you, allegedly, for quality assurance purposes during your consultations. Were you aware that this device records both sides of phone conversations? The color drained from Victor's face as he realized the trap. I may have given her a device for note-taking purposes. Rodriguez moved to the evidence table and activated a digital player. The courtroom fell silent as Victor's voice filled the room through the speakers. Barbara, you need to understand this operation works because you take the fall if anything goes wrong. I've done this with 6 other HOA letters across Florida and Georgia. The beauty is that you're the president, so when disaster strikes, everyone blames you while I disappear with my cut. The recording continued with devastating clarity. The insurance cancellation isn't about saving money, it's about creating a window where we can extract maximum funds before the inevitable claims hit. Natural disasters are perfect cover because everyone assumes you're just incompetent rather than criminal. Victor's testimony collapsed in real time as the recordings revealed the true scope of his operation. He had systematically targeted HOA letters with poor oversight, recruited desperate or greedy board members, and orchestrated a multi-state fraud scheme that had stolen nearly $2 million from unsuspecting homeowners. But the courtroom drama was far from over. As Davidson desperately tried to salvage his case, Agent Lisa Park took the stand with new evidence that shocked everyone, including Barbara's defense team. Agent Park, Davidson asked, has your investigation uncovered additional evidence relevant to this case? Yes, 3 days ago, we arrested 7 individuals in connection with a broader conspiracy involving 15 homeowners associations across the Southeast. Mr. Mallory was not just coordinating with Mrs. Chen, he was running a sophisticated criminal enterprise. Agent Park's testimony revealed that Victor's operation was even larger than anyone had imagined. He had recruited corrupt insurance adjusters, crooked HOA managers, and even some insurance company employees who provided insider information about policy cancellations and claim processing. The case took another shocking turn when Sarah Kim, the attorney representing the homeowners in their civil lawsuit, was called as a witness. What the courtroom didn't expect was her revelation about Barbara's attempted cooperation. Your Honor, Sarah testified. Mrs. Chen approached me 6 weeks ago with evidence about Mr. Mallory's operation. She provided financial records, recordings, and contact information that led directly to the FBI's expanded investigation. The revelation that Barbara had been cooperating with authorities while appearing to fight the charges added another layer of complexity to an already stunning case. Rodriguez had orchestrated a masterful legal strategy, allowing Barbara to appear as a defiant defendant while secretly providing evidence that destroyed the entire conspiracy. But Victor Mallory had one final card to play. During a recess, he approached Davidson with a plea bargain offer that would implicate Barbara as the true mastermind of the operation. She's been playing everyone, Victor told Davidson desperately. The recordings are edited. She was the one who contacted me with the scheme. I have documentation that proves she was running similar operations before we ever met. Davidson was skeptical but agreed to examine Victor's evidence. What he found was a collection of forged documents and fabricated emails that painted Barbara as a serial fraudster. The forgeries were sophisticated, but not sophisticated enough to fool FBI document analysis. As the trial entered its final phase, the prosecution's case had completely unraveled. Davidson faced the humiliating prospect of dropping charges against Barbara while watching his star witness face multiple federal indictments. Judge Williams called for a final recess as both sides prepared for closing arguments that would determine whether Barbara Chen walked free or spent decades in federal prison. But unbeknownst to everyone in the courtroom, Barbara's legal nightmare was about to take one final, shocking twist. Hidden in the evidence that Agent Park had collected was a document that would expose the most devastating secret of all. Victor Mallory's operation hadn't just targeted random HOA letters. He had specifically chosen communities with residents who worked in law enforcement, government, and the military communities where the financial damage would create maximum media attention and political pressure. The Hurricane Horror scandal wasn't just about greed and fraud. It was about something far more sinister. And Barbara Chen was about to discover that surviving Victor Mallory's conspiracy would only be the beginning of her fight for justice. As the courtroom prepared for the final arguments that would determine her fate, Barbara clutched the evidence folder that contained proof of Victor's real targets and his true motivations. The question was whether revealing this information would save her or make her a target for forces far more dangerous than a federal prosecutor. Judge Patricia Williams entered the packed courtroom for what everyone expected to be closing arguments and a jury verdict. But as Barbara Chen sat nervously beside Marcus Rodriguez, neither of them could have predicted the bombshell revelation that was about to transform their criminal trial into something far more explosive. Assistant U.S. Attorney Michael Davidson rose for his closing argument. But before he could speak, Agent Lisa Park burst through the courtroom doors with an urgent expression that made Judge Williams pause the proceedings. "Your Honor," Agent Park announced, "the government requests an immediate recess. We have uncovered evidence that fundamentally changes the nature of this case during the emergency recess." Agent Park revealed to Davidson and the defense team what FBI forensic analysts had discovered buried in Victor Mallory's encrypted files, a detailed target list that included not just HOA letters, but specific personal information about residents who work in sensitive government positions. "This wasn't random fraud," Agent Park explained grimly. "Mallory was specifically targeting communities with military personnel, federal agents, and defense contractors. The financial damage was designed to compromise individuals with security clearances." Barbara felt her world tilt as the implications became clear. Victor hadn't just been running a theft scheme, he'd been gathering intelligence on government employees through their financial vulnerability. The HOA frauds were cover for a sophisticated espionage operation. Rodriguez immediately recognized the opportunity this presented for Barbara's defense, but also the danger it posed to her safety. "Mrs. Chen," he whispered urgently, "this changes everything. You're not just a defendant anymore, you're a key witness in a national security investigation." When court reconvened, the atmosphere had completely shifted. Davidson, now coordinated with counterterrorism prosecutors, addressed the judge with unprecedented gravity. "Your Honor, in light of new evidence uncovered by federal investigators, the government is prepared to offer Mrs. Chen full immunity in exchange for her complete cooperation in a matter of national security." The gallery erupted in shocked murmurs. Sarah Kim, representing the homeowners, leaped to her feet. "Your Honor, my clients demand to know what this means for their civil recovery." But before Judge Williams could respond, Victor Mallory's attorney made a stunning announcement. "Your Honor, my client wishes to change his plea to guilty on all charges and provide information about co-conspirators in exchange for consideration." At sentencing, Victor's plea change revealed the true scope of his operation. Over 3 years, he had infiltrated 17 homeowners associations across the Southeast, specifically choosing communities near military bases, defense contractors, and federal facilities. The financial stress created by his fraudulent schemes was designed to make residents susceptible to recruitment by foreign intelligence services. "Mr. Mallory," Davidson questioned during his guilty plea allocution, "who provided you with the target list of communities to infiltrate?" Victor's answer sent shockwaves through the courtroom. "I was recruited by Elena Kozlov, a Russian intelligence operative who provided funding and target information." The HOA frauds were designed to identify Americans with security clearances who could be compromised through financial pressure. Barbara sat in stunned silence as the full scope of her unwitting participation became clear. Her 8 years as an authoritarian HOA president had made her the perfect recruit for Victor's scheme, someone with access, authority, and enough arrogance to believe she could outsmart any system. But the biggest twist was yet to come. As federal agents moved to arrest Elena Kozlov based on Victor's information, they discovered that she had already fled the country. However, her abandoned safe house contained something that would vindicate Barbara completely. Detailed psychological profiles of the HOA presidents Victor had recruited. Barbara's profile was particularly damning not to her, but to Victor's. Claims about her being a willing participant. Elena's notes described Barbara as textbook authoritarian personality, easily manipulated through flattery and full sense of superiority. Perfect and witting asset, the document continued. Subject shows no indication of understanding broader implications. Motivated purely by personal greed and desire for control, will require careful management to prevent exposure of operation. Agent Park presented this evidence to the court, and the impact was immediate. Far from being a criminal mastermind, Barbara had been specifically selected as a pawn in an intelligence operation precisely because of her psychological vulnerabilities. Judge Williams called for an immediate verdict conference. After 90 minutes of deliberation that included federal prosecutors, FBI counterterrorism agents, and defense attorneys, she returned to deliver an unprecedented ruling. Mrs. Chen. Judge Williams announced, after reviewing all evidence and considering the national security implications of this case, the court accepts the government's motion to dismiss all charges against you. However, you will be required to cooperate fully with the ongoing counterterrorism investigation. The courtroom erupted in chaos. Reporters rushed for their phones while Barbara sat in shocked silence, unable to process that her nightmare was over. But the real drama was just beginning. Sarah Kim immediately approached the bench with a motion that stunned everyone, Your Honor. In light of the evidence that Mrs. Chen was targeted and manipulated by foreign intelligence operatives, my clients wish to withdraw their civil lawsuit against her and redirect it toward the federal government for failing to detect this operation. The homeowners of Meadowbrook Estates had realized that Barbara, despite her arrogance and embezzlement, had been as much a victim as they were. Their real grievance was with a government system that had allowed foreign operatives to infiltrate American communities undetected. But the biggest surprise came from an unexpected source. Frank Chen, Barbara's husband, took the witness stand with a revelation that left everyone speechless. Your Honor, Frank testified, I need to disclose that I work for the Defense Intelligence Agency. For the past year, I've been investigating foreign recruitment operations targeting military communities. I suspected my wife was involved in something, but I thought it was an affair, not espionage. Frank's testimony revealed that the FBI had actually been monitoring Victor's operation for months, but they'd been unaware of the Elena Kozlov connection. Barbara's cooperation and the evidence she'd provided had been crucial to uncovering the broader intelligence network. As the courtroom proceedings concluded, Barbara found herself in an impossible position. She was legally free but professionally destroyed, financially ruined but protected by federal witness protection, and emotionally devastated but oddly vindicated. Standing outside the courthouse 6 hours later, Barbara faced a crowd of reporters, with Marquez Rodriguez beside her. The woman who had once terrorized neighbors over mailbox violations was now a key witness in an international espionage case. Mrs. Chen, a reporter called out, "Do you have any regrets about your time as HOA President?" Barbara paused, considering the question that seemed almost absurd given everything that had happened. "I spent 8 years thinking I was protecting property values," she said quietly. I never imagined I was being used to threaten national security. The final twist came 3 months later when the FBI arrested Elena Kozlov at Miami International Airport as she attempted to re-enter the United States. Her capture was made possible by intelligence Barbara had unknowingly gathered during her cooperation with Victor's scheme. Barbara Chen never returned to Meadowbrook Estates. The community, rebuilt with federal disaster assistance and proper insurance coverage, erected a small memorial to Hurricane Delilah's victims. But they also installed a plaque recognizing the importance of vigilance against both natural disasters and human threats. As for Barbara, she spent the next year in witness protection, while federal prosecutors dismantled Eleanor Kozlov's entire network. When she finally emerged to start a new life in Oregon, she carried with her the strangest resume in history. Former HOA tyrant turned accidental counterterrorism hero. The woman who had once fined neighbors for parking violations had helped expose a foreign intelligence operation that threatened American national security. Sometimes the most unlikely people become heroes in the most unexpected ways. But Barbara's story had one final chapter. On the anniversary of Hurricane Delilah, she received a package with no return address. Inside was a single photograph, Elena Kozlov in federal custody, and a note that read, "Thank you for your service to your country." The note was signed by Agent Lisa Park. But Barbara never learned the identity of the person who had first tipped off the FBI about suspicious activity in horror communities across the Southeast. Some secrets, she realized, were worth keeping. Barbara Chen's 8-year reign as HOA president had ended in scandal and federal court. But her unwitting service to national security had earned her something she never expected: the quiet gratitude of a grateful nation, and the knowledge that sometimes even the most flawed people can play a crucial role in protecting freedom. The Hurricane Horror scandal had revealed more than fraud and corruption. It had exposed the vulnerability of American communities to foreign manipulation, and the importance of vigilance in protecting not just property values, but the values that make America worth protecting. If you're still here, I'd really like to know what this reminded you of or what you would have done in my place. And hey, if this story hits something in you and you want to support the channel, that little thanks button's always there. Thanks for hanging out. We're HOA Headache Stories, and this is just one of many unbelievable tales. Catch more by checking out the next video. We promise it's even wilder.